What happens when Hollywood royalty forgets their manners and turns a beloved talk show into an absolute war zone? It only took 34 seconds of Chris Hemsworth sitting on that famous red couch before the entire night spiraled into complete chaos. This wasn't supposed to go down like this. Graham Norton had welcomed hundreds of A-list celebrities onto his show over the years. The format was simple, comfortable, fun. Get a few stars together, pour some drinks, share some laughs, tell some stories. Easy. But on this particular Friday night recording, something was different from the moment Chris Hemsworth walked through those doors. The audience was already settled in, buzzing with excitement. They'd come to see their favorite Thor actor, expecting the usual charm and those million-dollar smiles. Graham was at his desk, prepped and ready, notes in hand. He'd done this 1,000 times before. The lights dimmed, the band played, and Graham launched into his opening monologue with that signature energy everyone loved. "Tonight," Graham announced to roaring applause, "we have the God of Thunder himself, Chris Hemsworth." The crowd went wild. Hemsworth emerged from backstage, waving casually, that famous grin plastered across his face. But something was off. Anyone paying close attention could see it. The smile didn't quite reach his eyes. His walk was a little too stiff, a little too deliberate. He settled into the couch, and Graham, ever the professional, dove right in. "Chris, wonderful to have you here. You look fantastic. How have you been?" Hemsworth shifted in his seat, adjusting his jacket with an air of impatience. "Yeah, I've been fine. Graham. Busy, you know. Very busy." Of course, of course. Now I have to ask about your latest project. The fans are dying to know." "Actually," Hemsworth interrupted, his tone sharp enough to slice through the air, "before we get into all that, can we talk about the green room situation?" Graham blinked, momentarily thrown off his rhythm. The audience fell into a confused silence. This wasn't how these interviews usually started. "The green room?" Graham asked, maintaining his composure with a polite smile. "Yes, the green room," Hemsworth repeated, leaning back with his arms crossed. "I've been on a lot of talk shows, Graham. A lot. And I have to say, yours is probably the most disappointing I've experienced." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. Graham's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before he recovered, trying to navigate whatever storm was brewing. "Oh dear, I'm sorry to hear that. What seems to be the problem?" "What seems to be the problem?" Hemsworth echoed, his voice dripping with condescension. "Well, for starters, the water bottles in there were room temperature." "Room temperature, Graham. Do you know how unprofessional that is?" A nervous laugh rippled through the audience. Surely this was a joke. Surely Chris Hemsworth, beloved movie star, wasn't actually complaining about warm water on national television. But he wasn't laughing. Graham, bless him, tried to lighten the mood. "Well, I apologize for that. Perhaps we can get you some ice, yeah? Make it nice and cold for you." "It's not just about the water," Hemsworth continued, completely ignoring Graham's attempt at humor. "The seating was uncomfortable. The lighting was terrible. And frankly, the whole setup felt beneath someone of my caliber." The audience's nervous laughter turned into uncomfortable silence. This wasn't funny anymore. This was actually happening. Graham sat up a bit straighter in his chair, his professional mask still in place, though anyone who knew him could see the subtle tightening around his eyes. "Chris, we do our best to make all our guests comfortable. I'm sorry if something wasn't to your liking, but perhaps we could move on and—" "Move on?" Hemsworth scoffed. "Sure, let's move on. Let's talk about how I had to wait an extra 15 minutes before coming out here. Do you know what my time is worth, Graham? Clearly you don't. Or you wouldn't have kept me waiting like some nobody." Graham's face remained pleasant, but his voice carried a firmer edge now. "We run on a tight schedule here, Chris. Sometimes things run a few minutes over. It happens in live television. I'm sure you understand." "No, actually I don't understand," Hemsworth shot back. "When I agree to appear on a show, I expect a certain level of respect. I expect things to run smoothly. I expect professionalism. And we've provided that, Graham said, his patience clearly wearing thin, but still holding strong. We've been nothing but accommodating to you and your team since you arrived. Accommodating? Hemsworth laughed, but there was no warmth in it. Is that what you call this? Because from where I'm sitting, this entire operation is second rate at best. The audience gasped. Several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was crossing a line, and everyone knew it. Graham took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. Chris, I understand you might be having a difficult day, but there are hundreds of people here who've worked very hard to put this show together. My crew, the audience members who've waited hours to be here, they all deserve respect. Oh, here we go, Hemsworth said, rolling his eyes dramatically. The whole respect the crew speech. I've heard it all before, Graham. Let me tell you something. I'm the reason people are watching this show tonight. Not you, not your crew. Me. They came to see me. Graham's expression hardened. Actually, Chris, people tune into this show every week, regardless of who's sitting on that couch. They come for the atmosphere, the conversation, us, the fun. And right now, you're ruining that for everyone. Ruining it? Hemsworth's voice rose. I'm the only interesting thing about this entire setup. Without guests like me, you'd have nothing. This show would be nothing. That's not true, and you know it, Graham replied, his voice steady but firm. This show has been successful because we treat people with kindness and create a space where everyone can relax and have a good time. Something you seem incapable of doing right now. Hemsworth stood up abruptly, towering over the desk. Incapable? How dare you? Do you know who you're talking to? I know exactly who I'm talking to, Graham said, standing as well to meet Hemsworth's energy. I'm talking to someone who's forgotten that being talented doesn't give you permission to treat people poorly. Unbelievable, Hemsworth muttered, shaking his head. Absolutely unbelievable. I came here as a favor to you, to boost your ratings, and this is how you treat me. A favor? Graham's voice carried genuine disbelief now. Chris, you're here to promote your film. That's how this works. We give you a platform. You entertain our audience. It's a mutual arrangement. Mutual? Hemsworth spat the word out like it tasted bad. There's nothing mutual about this. I'm doing you a service by being here. Graham crossed his arms, his patience finally reaching its limit. If that's truly how you feel, then perhaps you shouldn't be here at all. The studio went dead silent. Even the crew members who'd been bustling around in the background froze. Had Graham Norton just suggested kicking a guest off his show? Hemsworth's face flushed red. Excuse me? You heard me, Graham said calmly. If you can't show basic respect to me, to my team, and to this audience, then I don't think this is going to work out. Are you actually asking me to leave? Hemsworth's voice was incredulous. I'm saying that if you continue with this attitude, then yes, I think it would be best if you left, Graham replied. I've never asked a guest to leave before, Chris, but I also don't allow people to insult my crew and belittle the work we do here. Hemsworth looked around the studio, as if expecting someone to come to his defense. But the audience sat in shocked silence. The crew members avoided his gaze. Even the band looked uncomfortable. This is ridiculous, Hemsworth said. You can't kick me off. Do you know what kind of publicity nightmare that would be for you? I'm more concerned about the kind of environment we maintain here, Graham responded, and right now, you're poisoning it. Fine, Hemsworth threw his hands up. You want me gone? I'm gone. But trust me, Graham, you're going to regret this. My fans, my followers, they're going to hear about how poorly you treated me. I think if anyone hears the truth about what happened here tonight, they'll understand exactly why I made this decision, Graham said quietly. Hemsworth started to storm off, then turned back for one last jab. You know what your problem is, Graham? You've been doing this so long, you've forgotten that without stars like me, you're nothing. Just another talk show host, desperately trying to stay relevant. Graham didn't flinch. And you know what, Chris? I'd rather be a talk show host who treats people with decency than a star who's forgotten how to be a decent human being. That was the final straw. Hemsworth's face contorted with rage. How dare you speak to me like that? I have won awards. I have millions of fans. I have achieved more than you could ever dream of. And yet here you are, Graham said softly, throwing a tantrum because your water wasn't cold enough. The audience couldn't help it. A few people let out quiet gasps. Someone in the back actually started clapping, but quickly stopped when they realized they were the only one. Hemsworth pointed a finger at Graham, his hand shaking with anger. This isn't over. You think you can humiliate me like this and just get away with it? I'm not trying to humiliate you, Chris, Graham said, his voice tired now. You're doing that all on your own. I'm just trying to protect the integrity of this show and the people who make it happen every single week. Integrity, Hemsworth laughed bitterly. That's rich coming from someone who makes a living off gossip and cheap laughs. I make a living off bringing joy to people, Graham corrected, off creating a space where everyone feels welcome and valued. Something you clearly don't understand. Hemsworth took a step closer to the desk, his voice dropping to something almost threatening. You're making a huge mistake, Graham. A huge mistake. When I walk out of here, I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of show you really run. Then I guess people will finally see your true colors too, Graham replied, not backing down an inch. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The entire studio held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Finally, Hemsworth broke eye contact. I'm done here, he muttered. I think that's for the best, Graham agreed. Hemsworth turned on his heel and marched toward the exit. But he couldn't resist one more parting shot. He spun around, addressing the audience directly. You all just witnessed what happens when someone questions Graham Norton's precious little show, he announced. Remember this moment. Remember how he treated a guest who dared to voice legitimate concerns. The audience remained silent. Not a single person applauded or showed support. They just stared, bewildered by the spectacle unfolding before them. Graham addressed the audience himself, his voice calm and measured. I want to apologize to all of you who came here tonight expecting a fun show. This isn't how I wanted this evening to go, but I will never compromise the values this show stands for. Not for anyone. The audience erupted in applause. Real, genuine, supportive applause. They were on Graham's side, and they wanted him to know it. Hemsworth's face went pale as he realized the room was completely against him. Unbelievable, he muttered one more time, then stormed off the stage. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the studio. A door slammed somewhere backstage, and just like that, he was gone. Graham stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. Then he looked at his audience, many of whom were still clapping, and gave them a small, genuine smile. Well, he said, his trademark humor creeping back into his voice. That was unexpected. The audience laughed, the tension finally breaking. But it was a relieved laugh, the kind that comes after a crisis has been averted. I've been doing this show for many years, Graham continued, sitting back down at his desk. And in all that time, I've met incredible people, funny people, kind people, talented people. But I've also learned that fame and success don't automatically make someone a good person. They don't give anyone the right to treat others poorly. He paused, collecting his thoughts. The people who work on this show, my crew, they're family to me. They show up every single day and pour their hearts into making something special. And I will always, always stand up for them, even if it means having difficult moments like the one you just witnessed. The applause started again, even louder this time. Graham held up a hand, quieting them gently. Thank you truly, but let's not let this ruin our evening entirely, shall we? We still have a show to do, even if it's a bit shorter than planned. He glanced at his notes, then looked back at the audience with a mischievous glint in his eye. You know, I had a whole list of questions prepared about his workout routine and his favorite hammer techniques, Graham joked. Such a shame we didn't get to those. The audience roared with laughter, so grateful for the levity after such an intense confrontation. In all seriousness, though, Graham continued once the laughter died down, I hope Chris finds whatever it is he's looking for. I hope he realizes that kindness matters more than cold water bottles. And I hope that maybe, just maybe, this will be a learning experience for him. He meant it too. Despite everything that had just happened, there was no malice in Graham's voice. Just genuine hope that someone he just had to remove from his show might grow from the experience. Now, Graham said, clapping his hands together, we may not have our scheduled guest, but we do have this wonderful audience, a fantastic band, and about 20 minutes of airtime to fill. Who wants to hear some stories from behind the scenes of this show? The audience cheered enthusiastically. And so Graham did exactly that. He told funny stories about other guests, shared bloopers that never made it to air, and even brought out a couple of crew members to share their favorite moments from over the years. What could have been a complete disaster turned into something special. Something real. The audience got to see a different side of the show, one that was usually hidden behind the polished exterior. But nobody in that studio would forget what had happened in those first few minutes. Nobody would forget watching Chris Hemsworth, one of the biggest movie stars in the world, throw a fit over warm water. Nobody would forget watching him insult the very people who had worked to make him look good. And nobody would forget watching Graham Norton stand his ground, refusing to let anyone disrespect his show or his team, no matter how famous they were. As the evening wound down and the audience filed out, the whispers started. People pulled out their phones, texting friends and family about what they'd just witnessed. Within hours, word would spread. Within days, the whole world would know. But in that moment, as Graham wrapped up the show with his usual warmth and charm, something important had been established. A line had been drawn. A statement had been made. No amount of fame, no number of box office records, no superhero role would ever be important enough to justify treating people poorly. Not on Graham Norton's show. Not anywhere. The lights dimmed. The cameras stopped rolling. The band packed up their instruments. Another show was in the books, though this one would be remembered very differently than most. Graham sat at his desk for a moment after everyone had left, processing the evening. His producer approached, concern written all over their face. "Are you okay?" they asked. Graham nodded slowly. "I am. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary." "You handled it perfectly," the producer assured him. "The way you stood up for the team, for the show. Everyone appreciates it." "I just did what felt right," Graham said simply. "This show has always been about creating a positive space. I couldn't let that be compromised." He stood up, stretching his back. "Besides, we've had plenty of wonderful guests over the years who remind me why I love doing this. One bad apple doesn't spoil the whole bunch." The producer smiled. "That's true. Next week we've got, But Graham held up a hand. "Tell me tomorrow. Right now. And I think I need a drink and a good night's sleep." They both laughed, and Graham headed toward his dressing room. As he walked through the empty studio, he thought about all the conversations that had happened on that red couch over the years. The laughter, the tears, the confessions, the celebrations. Thousands of moments, the vast majority of them wonderful. This night would stand out, certainly. It would be talked about and analyzed and probably turned into countless headlines. But it wouldn't define the show. It couldn't. Because at its core, the show was about connection, about bringing people together and finding the humor and humanity in every situation. And while Hemsworth had forgotten that, Graham never would. He opened the door to his dressing room, ready to wash off the night and start fresh tomorrow. Because that was the thing about live television, about life in general, really. There was always another show, another chance, another opportunity to get it right. And Graham Norton had every intention of continuing to get it right, one guest at a time, for as long as people kept tuning in. The studio lights went dark, the building grew quiet, and somewhere in the night, the story of what happened when Hollywood entitlement met British politeness was just beginning to spread.